Minute, and then I'll introduce you. All right, welcome. We are live. Welcome to episode 25 of BenThere. This is kind of a milestone, and I'm super excited about our guest today. She's someone, for once, I actually don't know that well. I did not go to high school with. She's, those of you that are watching, I usually have a lot of people on here that I know pretty well. But that said, she is someone who definitely fits the mold of the TCK, ATCK, and even CCK. And I'm going to let her explain what every one of those acronyms means in just a minute. But those of you that are watching, thank you so much. This is episode 25, which is crazy to think. It's kind of a wild ride. It's this started off as I said this many times on the show, but this started off as just a show about boredom during COVID, and it's turned into something so much bigger, and I'm loving every minute of it. So thank you for watching wherever you're watching from. If it's on Facebook, if it's on YouTube, thank you either way. But I'm so excited to have our guest today, Miss Megan C. Norton. We're gonna get right to it. Megan, how are you?
Hey, Ben. I'm good. Thanks for letting me be on your show.
Absolutely. No, thanks for doing this, first of all. And I got to, before we even get started, it looks like our buddy just chimed in. So I'm going to pop his little message up here real quick. There's our buddy Calvin, who we actually have a mutual connection through. Calvin, good. I guess it's good morning for Calvin, right?
Yeah. Hey, Calvin.
Yeah. Hey, Calvin. Wake up. Rise and shine, buddy. But yeah, so getting back to Miss Megan, usually the way I do this, Megan, you've seen the show. We talked about that a little bit before we went live, but I don't want to steal your thunder right away. I want to make sure people hear it from you directly. So if you don't mind, if you could just summarize your upbringing and where your family's from originally, where you live currently, where you grew up, all that fun stuff, just so the people watching. And before you say that, I do want to make sure people understand this is a show just about people. Realistically, it's about people. I mean, we've kind of gone the route of TCKs, and I'm very proud of that. I am one myself, third culture kids. It's not always the case. I'm going to have, the next couple episodes, I'm going to have some people on that are not TCKs. But you're a TCK, you're an adult TCK. If you don't mind kind of telling your story briefly, we'll kind of take off from there, and then we'll just run with this. So go ahead.
Yeah, great. Thanks again, Ben.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, all right, third culture kid, TCK. I would say I'm a second generation TCK on my mom's side because she was from a military family, so moved around a bunch. And first generation TCK, like on my dad's side, because he was born and bred in Michigan, but then he joined the military, which then went into a career into the foreign service. So I grew up as a diplomat dependent. And so do you want the list?
I do. I want it all. Give it to me. Yeah.
Okay, here we go. So deep breath.
Mm-hmm.
I was born in Virginia. Womp womp. So exotic.
So was my dad, by the way. So
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I work with a lot of foreign service dependents now, and I mean, we just love Virginia because that's our common ground. So, I don't want to hate on Virginia. So, it's actually a wild state. Like, it's amazing. So, go there if you haven't been there.
Right.
So Virginia, then we moved to Pretoria, South Africa. And there I went to the first post-apartheid preschool. So that's something like some people don't know about me. I know that's a question you sometimes ask us, but that's not something I brought up, but that's part of my TCK story. So do like to mention that. And then we moved back to Virginia. Then we moved to Seoul, South Korea. And then to
Asia.
Yeah. Your stomping ground. Well, area of the globe.
Yeah.
And then we moved to Bonn, Germany. Only there for 1 year. And then we moved to Frankfurt, Germany. So, just kind of down the street. But we were there for 2 years. And then we moved to Tokyo, Japan. And then we moved to Tel Aviv, Israel. So I graduated in Tel Aviv, Israel. And so all of those moves happened before I was 18. So that's the TCK bit. And then, I continued my globe-trotting journey after 18 as well. Do you want that now too?
Yeah, totally. Let's just bring it to. Can you?
Yeah.
We're getting a lot of feedback again. Can you hear me? Okay.
I can. Yeah.
Okay. Do you hear that feedback?
No.
Okay, I'm gonna turn my mic down just. So, tell me if you're good though, right? You can hear me.
I'm good.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So adult TCK wise, because that's one of the acronyms we haven't really talked about too much on this. I am as well because I ended up overseas for a couple of years, but ATCK, that's adult third culture kid. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there are two kind of definitions, I would say, or approaches that people use with that acronym. Some would say you can use that if you grew up in one place for 18 years and then as an adult you went abroad. And some say that's being an adult TCK. Personally, I think they hijacked the term a little bit because an adult TCK term came out of TCKs who didn't want to be called kids in adulthood. So they're like, I'm an adult TCK, which honored their global upbringing, but brought into, yeah, I'm an adult now. But also, you know, like you're using it, adult TCK can also mean like I continued my global upbringing into adulthood. So if people who grew up in one place want to use kind of a terminology about their global trotting as an adult, that would be third culture adult, not third culture kid. So anyways, technicalities.
No, I like it. I'm gonna learn so much on this episode. I'm so excited about this. So you never actually told us where you went though. So as an adult TCK,
Okay.
where were you? Yeah.
Yeah, so I went to school in Florida for university. During that time, my parents moved to Vienna, Austria. So this is certainly a place of privilege, I recognize, but I went to Vienna, Austria, you know, cry every summer break, winter break.
Yeah.
And I was able to work at the embassy there. So that was, you know, a very unique summer break experience. And then I moved to Athens, Greece to get a master's degree, as you do. And then I moved to Greenville, South Carolina.
You went too far from where I went to college. Then have you heard of Brevard, North Carolina?
No.
Up in the Smoky Mountains are there, and it's near Asheville, North Carolina.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No worries. Yeah, I'm just trying to think the list. Yes, Greenville. And then I moved to Hungary. And then I moved back to Virginia, DC area, and got another master's degree. And then I moved to Poland. And now I'm in Michigan.
Okay.
So.
Okay. No, that's wild. Yeah. You. I like to joke that I've lived 27. I've had 27 addresses in 44 years. I'm old. So. But yeah, that's awesome because I think you've got me beat maybe. What I gotta ask though, why Greenville, South Carolina? What was going on there?
Okay, so I don't know.
I bet we used to go ice skating. There was an ice rink where we used to play hockey a little bit and then a little bit of ice skating just to get out and about. So it wasn't too far from where I was at. That's why I gotta know.
Yeah, Greenville's beautiful. The downtown, yeah, I love the downtown especially. So Greenville is just like a blip in my story. I was kind of at this crossroads of I finished my master's in Greece and I really wanted to stay in Europe. This was like 2009, 2010, so there was still like kind of an economic crisis going on everywhere. And I wasn't able to secure a visa at that point. So I was looking at options where to go back in the US and didn't really feel any huge pull to one area. My brother was living in Greenville at the time. And so I went to go live with him and I got my TESOL certification. And that's when I was like, oh, I can become a language instructor and go back overseas. Yes, please. And so it was a really short time, but a really good time too.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, actually, I love that area. So that's why, man, we're getting a lot of feedback. I'm down, so I don't know if you're good or not.
Do you want me to put on headphones?
Sure. Maybe that'll help. I think it's on my side, so that's why I'm just kind of turning down my mic and I've put it down a little bit. So no, that's fantastic. It's just nice to not only know we have so much in common via the overseas thing, but yeah, you've lived in a similar place. How many states have you lived in then? I think it's 10. Is that what I read?
No, 10 countries. Can you hear me with
10
this?
countries. Yeah. Yeah. Perfect. Actually, that's better. That's way
Okay.
better. Yeah.
So 10 countries, 5 US states.
Oh, okay. Well, good. I finally have you beat on something. I've got you beat in states.
What's your
So,
number?
I think I'm at 6. So I got you beat by 1. A whole 1. So yeah, well, because I've been in Utah, Idaho, Chicago. That's 3. North Carolina, Texas, and I know I'm missing something, but I know it's 6. So there you go.
Mhm.
Illinois. Well, Illinois instead of Chicago, but yeah. But that's awesome. Look, you're gonna get the question that I always start the show off with, and I know it's a burden for us TCKs. You've been all over the world. You've lived in 10 countries, as you just said. You've lived in 6 states. So let me ask you, you're in Michigan right now. Where's home?
Mm.
It's a softball question. There you go. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So because we're gonna take the time to unpack this,
Yeah.
I'll give you, my multi-pronged answer. With TCKs, you can say, yeah, I'm originally from here, but I grew up here, give people an idea for, that 4-second answer. For me, it's interesting to think about the different stages and ages of life where I would say either I was from a certain country or, a certain state. But in general, I don't say I'm from, or I don't say my homes are the countries I grew up in anymore. And that could change, but I call them my heart homes. So they definitely, so they definitely are part of my story, part of who I am. They did shape and impact and leave an imprint. And so I think that's something I carry in my heart. Sometimes I say I'm home full, that.
Oh, wow. I like that too. Wow. Yeah. This is good. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I also define home as where my physical and emotional needs are met. So home can, in that kind of definition, home can mean it's a place where your physical and emotional needs are met. Sometimes that can be a person. So a person can meet those needs as well. So it's really like, it depends who I'm talking to, where I define home. And oh my gosh, do you know the podcast with Stephen Black? It's called TCK Care, the podcast.
I've heard of it. I haven't listened to it yet. Yeah.
I want to connect you with Stephen.
Okay, cool.
He's
Definitely.
amazing.
Stephen
So,
Black. I'm writing this down in my notes. So Stephen Black. Okay.
Yeah. So he had a podcast episode recently with another podcaster who is working on his 5th season, I think. It's called TCK Tales.
I've heard of that one.
Yeah, okay. So they were talking about this like place, belonging, home, and they made this analogy. So I want to credit, to them, but like anchors versus roots. So home can be your anchors and people in tradition, in community. But where are your roots too? Like roots are so much more permanent than an anchor. And so I think Michigan for me, is kind of a taproot for me because of the historical connection I have to it, kind of an emotional connection. And now having lived here, all of this year, I travel a lot with the various opportunities I've had. And so this year being stationary, I've realized how I've cultivated this as home. And that's been a new take on my journey. So home
Yeah,
full,
we're gonna talk. I appreciate the answer, and we're gonna talk about that because as folks like us, I don't know if you've watched the last couple episodes, but that has been one of the strangest and hardest things for folks like you and I, and people that are watching this probably. But yeah, this COVID thing. I mean, don't get me wrong; it's a serious thing. It's a horrible thing. I feel horrible for. I'm lucky. I'm healthy right now. My family's pretty healthy. It's a serious thing, so I don't want to take anything away from people that are struggling right now with COVID, but yeah, folks like us that are so used to having plans, so used to having a trip plan, going somewhere, having and I'm not talking vacations. I'm just talking life in general, right?
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
I think I said this on the last show with Matt, but it's the first time in my life I don't have any plans. I have no airplane ticket. I have no like hotel booked. I've got nothing, and it's such a weird time. Yeah,
Yeah. Yep.
yeah, yeah,
Absolutely. I can relate to that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
It's
especially for you
mhm.
because you've been traveling around speaking and doing your thing, and we're gonna brag about you in just a second. I told you we were going to,
Oh,
so I can't wait to get to that. But
thanks,
yeah,
man.
it's definitely a weird time. So.
Hmm. Hmm.
Well, let's dive in then. Let's hit it. You know, we hit it running here. But you grew up in a lot more countries than I did. You know, I was a lucky guy. I got 3 years in Hong Kong and then 7 years in Taipei. I'm a Taipei American School graduate, proud of it. Ended up going back overseas years later, 20 plus years later. But in terms of your upbringing, because you did move around a lot because of your dad's job, it sounds like you're a diplomatic kid, where I was a business brat, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So let's talk about positives and negatives about growing up the way you and I both did. Like, what do you give me some positives, give me some negatives. If you had it
Yeah.
all over, you had the chance to do it all over on your own, in your own right, would you? So yeah, talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, I do love talking about the positives and negatives.
Mhm.
Because I do think there's a tendency or a skew sometimes on forums, on TCK forums, like complain a lot, or can skew negative, or alternatively, there can be like this absolute mindset of being a TCK is awesome and we're so unique. So it really is this nuanced complex of both and of positive and negative. And I certainly want to, encourage parents who are walking this kind of lifestyle with their children that it is going to be that both and. It's not 100% positive, it's not 100% negative. And every story is nuanced and every story is different. But, I'm curious if you can relate to this about, of course, the positives is the travel. It's
Mhm.
the sure like availability of seeing new places, understanding new communities, new cultures, new ways of being, of doing. And yeah, that's such a privilege and a blessing of being a TCK. The flip side of that, it can create this kind of like identity complex of like, well, who am I? Like, if I am, if I've adopted things into my identity, what's at the core. So
Yeah.
there can be that. Then we volley back to the positives of like, well, if I have been exposed, I can code switch. I know how to adapt my behavior. I know like the certain things of what's appropriate, what manners are good, what gestures are bad. And the flip side of that, right? If we flip the coin, is TCKs have spent so much of their lives like adapting and meeting other people's needs that they can sometimes be people pleasers. And again, that's like what are my needs? What are my personal boundaries? So we can go back and forth, also like linguistic abilities, whether or not that's multiple languages or understanding the nuances of language. That's also really, I think, a benefit of growing up in the international school system, or even if you go to a local school system. But then we look at the negative, and maybe you are multilingual, but you don't have that academic level where you can't study at university in that language, and that's a drawback. Or maybe you lose like an opportunity to understand idioms, and you don't know like, or you mess them up. So
Yeah.
yeah, those are just some examples. Can you relate to any of those?
Oh, absolutely. Because I get spoiled when I used to talk about this a lot more. And now it's kind of, the older I get, the kind of quieter I get about it. Not for any reason other than I'm just getting older, right? But when you talk about travel, here in the States, I coach high school baseball, and I love it. And they always talk about their state tournament. That's the biggest deal, right? I don't know how this worked for you, where you maybe in Tokyo, because where'd you go to school in Tokyo?
The American school.
ASIJ?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Did you
I gotta
compete?
ask now. Yeah, we did. And I actually, I gotta ask, who's your principal?
Oh my gosh, I don't remember.
Was it Don Bennis? Does that name ring a bell?
Um, no,
Okay.
it doesn't ring a
Doesn't ring a
bell.
bell, but that's all right. Okay. But he was actually in Taipei before he went to ASIJ. That's why I asked.
Okay.
But the whole point of that is I sit back and think like these kids here in the States, don't get me wrong, it's a great thing. It's a time honored thing, you know, that you get to go to state tournaments, and, you know, you have a good year, you get to go to state tournaments.
Hmm.
Well, then I sit back and they always ask me like, oh, where'd you play high school? You know, baseball and basketball. You know, I was a 3-sport guy. I was a sport guy. And I would tell them, you know, about my upbringing, you know, the
Hmm.
fact that we were in Hong Kong for a couple of years, but then my main high school years were in Taipei. And they're
Hmm.
like, well, how did that work with your sports, with your end of the season tournaments, with your state tournaments? I'm like, well, obviously we didn't have state. And they're like, oh, that's too bad, coach. I feel bad for you. And then I'd like start smiling, and they're like, what's up? And I'm like, don't feel bad for me.
Like,
And they're like, why? I'm like, because you guys take a yellow bus here and go to about a 30-minute town away, right?
right.
I would get on a plane and fly to
Yep.
another country to meet other kids that
Right.
grew up just like you and I did. And, you know, I was like,
Right.
I can't, like, how do you explain that to a kid who only knows the system here, right?
Hmm.
And how do you not smile and just think spoiled, right? And it
Hmm.
wasn't so much spoiled, it was just the way it is. I mean,
Exactly.
yeah, and you could probably relate to this too. It's never been about better or worse. Like I don't consider myself better. You know, my brother doesn't consider himself better. It's just the way it was. I thought
Hmm.
everybody grew up that way. I thought
Hmm.
everybody did what you and I did.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, I can totally relate to the positives of just exploring at such a young age, seeing things that people only dream about, you know,
Hmm.
and that's a fascinating thing. But, and we're going to talk about this later, but yeah, totally agree with you. The negative big time is that sense of self and who you are, especially when you move back to wherever it is you're supposed to be from. So we'll
Hmm.
get into that in a minute. So
Hmm.
I don't want to steal your thunder there, but yeah, I totally agree with you. So
Yeah. Yeah. And then of course, the amount of people you meet and the
mhm,
relationships you develop, and then the negative is the relational loss when
yeah.
you move away. And
Yeah,
do you, you know,
we get really good and almost masters at saying goodbye, right?
hmm.
And
Hmm.
that's a tough gig, even 20 plus years later. It doesn't make it easier. It just is what it is. So
Yeah.
it's yeah. No, I appreciate the honesty. Thank you for that answer. So yeah, let's talk about international schools then, because obviously you went to a bunch. You know, I'm picking up on that. So
Yeah.
what was
Hmm.
your? Do you have any good stories? What was your experience like at, you know, each stop?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, overall, generally, really great. I want to do a special shout out to Frankfurt International School because I think their transition program was way before their time. They definitely did a great buddy system where I was paired with someone in my grade who had been there before, a few years before
Mhm.
me, and so knew the lay of the land. Definitely made friends fast, and then also Frankfurt brought me back as a facilitator for a workshop, and
Oh wow,
it was just amazing to like. I got my little visitor badge, and
yeah.
in the counselor's office, she had this bookshelf of yearbooks, and I'm like, all
Mhm.
right, I'm gonna reveal how old I am, but
That's all right.
yeah.
I'm definitely older, so don't worry about
No, no,
that.
no, I'm not gonna reveal it here, but
Okay. Oh, okay.
counselors, like, I
Okay.
revealed because I'm like, "I was in middle school this year." But it was just like seeing baby Megan and,
Yeah.
being back and being, we'll get to this, but, like, being the mentor that I really needed, doing the work that, I really needed to encourage the teens and preteens to do on themselves, like as a TCK. I really wish somebody had come in to do that debriefing, that processing, that encouraging and affirming with me. So, anyways, I just think Frankfurt did a really phenomenal job, especially in a transition that's kind of sensitive when you're a preteen and so many changes are happening and your brain is expanding and
Yeah.
it's just, wild. So,
Yeah, You and I talked about this before we went live, but yeah, I was a teacher for a long time, and I spent some time back overseas
Yeah.
as an administrator. But yeah, and one thing you're giving shouts out, so I'll give a shout out too. Like Shanghai Community International School is where I was working when I went back to Shanghai, and growing up the way I did, there was no. I mean, it was a different time. It's not a fault of Taipei American schools. I'm sure they do this now as well. But you talked about the buddy system and the fact that they partnered you up with somebody who'd been living there, going through the motions, all that stuff. That's definitely something that I was really impressed with when I moved to Shanghai, is because of the school I was working at. Shanghai Community International School was doing that exact same thing, and it's so important. It wasn't and again, it's not a fault. It was just a different time. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and it just wasn't what it was now. The
Right.
concept of third culture kids and learning and adjusting to the environment the way we have now in place, it wasn't there. It's
Right.
not right, not wrong. It just wasn't there, and so
Right.
I applaud schools like that. So we'll definitely give a shout out to Frankfurt International School on the post wrap up here. But yeah,
Yes, awesome. Yeah. So, and I don't know also about your experience. I'm
yeah,
curious to know, I think international schools are such a unique place. Just a microcosm of the world, essentially, model United Nations,
yeah,
every country's
yeah,
represented,
totally.
but you make fast friends, and yet there is I don't know. In some schools, there's a notion of privilege and hierarchy and status. And some schools I went to, that was more obvious and overt. But for the most part, I think that you're friends. You're just fast friends, and you're all TCKs, and even cross-cultural kids. Like,
So explain that. Let me stop
okay,
you real quick.
okay.
Explain the difference between TCKs and CCKs.
Okay, yes. So again, there's been a long preamble of defining these terms, and I think what's added to the conflation of definitions is we're getting academics and researchers who are trying to put parameters, and then you have practitioners who are like, well, this is what it means, and then you have people who don't want to be labeled, and others who are like, well, I didn't grow up overseas, but I have now traveled a lot of places. So, I identify as a TCK. I'm like, no, that's all right. That's a little bit of a stretch. So what has happened now with understanding in this kind of community with researchers and practitioners, in my opinion, is that there's an agreed upon umbrella term called cross-cultural kid. And so it acts as an umbrella because TCKs are now a subgroup or a sub-identity or sub-profile of CCK. So they kind of go with the traditional definition of you are an individual who has spent a significant time before or in your developmental years outside of your passport country. So that's like the original definition. Well, at international schools, you have educational cross-cultural kids. So these are defined as individuals who have perhaps a home culture that's different than the education system in which they're learning. So every day crossing that school gate, they have to code switch, right? So at their home, they're expected to act a certain way. And then going into the education system, they act a certain way, or they're learning a certain way. So those are educational cross-cultural kids. Now, a cross-cultural kid can also be an immigrant, a migrant. Cross-cultural kid can also have dual nationalities, or all the different kind of subsets of what it can be. So I think that's the most simplest way to kind of explain those differences.
So, no, thank you for clarifying that, because I
Okay.
hadn't heard the term cross culture until I started doing the show, which I appreciate that, because I think some of the guests that I've actually had on here are more cross cultural. Now that I can have some time to reflect and think about
Yeah.
it, but yeah, some of the guests that I've had on here are actually cross cultural
Yeah.
kids
Okay.
instead of TCKs.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's good.
Mm-hmm. Well, you can be both, right? And I don't know if you've gotten this sense too on. I feel like some of our peers are now like there's a hierarchy of or status of how really TCK are you? How many passports do you
Really?
have?
Yeah.
How many citizenships do you have?
Yeah.
Wow, you're a star TCK. I'm like this, like, I'm just a traditional one. Like,
Yeah, I'm just a boring old
not
TCK right
fancy.
here. So yeah.
I have one passport now.
Yeah, just one. I
Yeah.
barely speak English well enough to say I know, I get that. That's true. But on those lines though, with the international school connection, then I don't know if you watched a couple weeks ago. I had I grew up just idolizing this guy, Scott McCann. He's probably watching. Hopefully, he's watching, or he'll see this in a couple weeks. But
he was a senior when you were a freshman.
He was, he was truly the guy I wanted to be. Everything about, hopefully he's watching. But we talked about this. I mean, it's no big secret. But he brought up something. Probably the most positive person I know is Scott McCann, and I love that. But he brought up something regarding, because we talked about international schools, and we talked about why is it that we're so connected. I don't know if you are, and I want to get into this, and that's why I'm throwing this out at you. We're still, like, I haven't seen Scott in 25, 30 years, but we picked up, boom, just like that. Yeah. His sister was he's got a younger sister my age, and he's got an older sister a couple years older than him. But he talked about the concept of a chosen family, and I love that. It was just like something went off in my head, and I talked about, that same exact thing to Matt last week. But the chosen family, these are people that, maybe the reason we're so tight, obviously everybody's kind of thrown into that blender, and you don't really have a choice. And yet everybody's in the same spot. Everybody's, at one point, whether they move in 6th grade, kindergarten, senior year, you're always going to be the new kid. Everybody's the new kid at some point, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the chosen family thing I loved in just the generic term of it. But, these are colleagues that you became friends with overseas, and yet you still can just pick up right where you left off. Do you still have, without revealing your age here, but like what, do you still have contacts, and do you still have a chosen family, friendships that you still are, deeply involved with, even years later?
Yeah, absolutely. And I attribute that, that notion of, we pick up immediately, because TCK is one of the ways, a pattern that TCKs connect on is you connect immediately on stories, and TCKs will dive in fast, like, oh yeah, I've been there, or oh, I really want to go there. So they connect on stories. And so that can sometimes be really bonding when you pick up again. You're like, you connect over that and shared interests. Whereas there's this model that was popularized by some TCK care practitioners who made the comparison, and then how like monocultural friends will make friends. And again, this is like from a Western perspective, namely like a US context, but TCKs where they connect fast on friends, they'll like do a deep dive on like, let's see how many things we can connect on. Because they do that because time is short. You either know I'm going to leave, or my friend is going to leave, or something's going to happen and we're both going to leave. So you make fast friends. And then monocultural US Americans will make friends over time, doing things together. So either you go play basketball together, or you'll go gaming together, or you'll go hang out at a cafe together. So actually doing the actions over time makes you fast friends. So looking at it from that perspective, you can see how like, oh, I shared so much, so fast that like, yes, we can pick up right after we see each other 20 years later. So, that's something to chew on a little bit. But for me, like, social media wasn't a thing, like Facebook wasn't a thing, like, in middle school and high school. And so, like years later, I connected, with my best friend when we were in South Korea over a hashtag, like amazing. Like, our Instagrams are open. And so the hashtags were live. She was like, is this Megan from Korea? And I was like, what is this, Becky? So
Yeah.
yeah, definitely chosen family. Now, what's interesting, and you're going to ask me, I think this later, or you asked me to think about it, was how is living abroad as an adult different than living abroad as a kid? And it goes into this chosen family versus like, well, I call it like capital F family, where it's, you know, your blood relation, and then lowercase family, where it's
I
your
like that.
chosen or adopted family. And in one place I lived, they're like, you must not be really close to your family, capital F. And I'm like, well, my nuclear immediate family, yeah, that's certainly the case. And it really confused me. And I realized that they were saying, well, why would you come work here as a single young woman without any family? And so it really goes into cultural differences, cultural context differences, where, yeah, I did have the skills and the desire, and also coming from a culture where it valued, like, yeah, you go abroad, you go live your dreams, you go be independent, and going into a cultural context where it's like, but your family is king. But they did become my adopted family, so lowercase. So it all worked
Yeah.
out.
No, I
Yeah.
love that. Where do you and this wasn't on the list, but where do you feel most comfortable? Do you feel most comfortable overseas, or do you feel most comfortable stateside?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I think I mean, it definitely depends on, you know, where in the world. You know,
Mhm.
we both realize we've never been to South America,
Yeah.
so I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know how I'd feel there.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, that's very different with different
Yeah,
countries.
let me
So
stop you and explain that. Before we went live, everybody, we were talking about all the places we'd been to before we went live, and the irony is, she and I both have not been to one of the closest places to the
yeah,
States. We've been all over the world, but we've never been to South. Neither one of us has been to South America, and it wasn't until I was almost 30, I think, that I'd been to Canada. So it was one of those kind of
okay.
wild things. Like I'd never been to the closest places that border the States, yet I've
Yeah,
been all over the place, all over
yeah,
the world. So yeah, same with you.
yeah. So
Yeah.
definitely have a bucket list. But I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel most comfortable in an airport because,
Yeah.
you know,
Talk,
it's like,
please talk about this, because I've been trying to explain this to so many people. Even my wife, she doesn't get it. Like, why do you like airports? I'm like, just go. I want to hear what you're saying. Go ahead.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's definitely an in-between place. It's an in-between space.
Mhm.
You know, I think also airports bring up the sense of closure, but also anticipation.
Yeah.
It's I'm not known, and so I can be with my feelings. I can be with all the feels, but it's yeah, it's definitely a comfort that, yeah, I the it's kind of like that doorway or that hallway where it's like I'm saying goodbye to some place, but I am so ready for the new adventure and opportunity.
Yeah, I love that, because that's exactly how I feel. I actually feel, once you get, Calvin just chimed in, airport is our Disneyland. I couldn't have said it better,
Yes,
Calvin. Um,
yes,
but that's exactly right. Like there's a sense when you've lived it, and I got my first passport when I was like 6. That's all I've known, right? And
yeah,
so when you go into it, it's that excitement of knowing you're going somewhere, and yet the calmness of just, yeah, I don't know why. It's in hotels as well. I don't know if you feel this way, but
mm,
I'm one of those. I'm odd. I'm an odd duck, because I sleep better and I fall asleep faster on airplanes, and then I get to a hotel, and most people can't sleep in hotels. I'm out. Like
yeah,
that's my, just because I was raised that way. My
yeah,
brother and I spent so many years in just traveling, and again,
mhm,
not right or wrong. This isn't a better or
mhm,
worse thing. It's not I'm better than you.
right,
It's nothing like that. it's just
right,
it's just that was our story.
hmm,
And so
yes,
when I hear like Calvin saying, airports are a Disneyland, it's so funny, because I just finished a writing on my blog. I haven't posted it yet, but I'm about to, probably tonight after this. But it's about airports. It's a dear airports, I miss you. It's one of
oh,
those things. Yeah, but it's,
yes,
you understand, Calvin will understand, people that grew up the way we did. And I don't mean it cocky. I don't mean it like, I'm not
hmm,
trying to be an ass. I'm
right,
not like saying like I'm better
right,
than you because I've been all over the place. It's not
hmm,
it. It's just there's such a level, in a weird twisted way, there's such a level of comfort in
hmm,
that chaos that airports provide, right?
yes,
The I don't miss the lines. I don't miss, all that stuff, going through customs, all that. But there's such a sense of like, I'm at peace. I'm calm. I'm not one of those people that gets all nervous and tense and all that when I'm in an airport or in a hotel. It's just there's such a level, and I think it's totally related to how we grew up.
Yeah.
You know, I love airports. I miss them.
Yeah.
So.
I know, right? I do too. Like that's been so strange this year. Definitely strange. But yeah, this is not my story, but a really cute story to tell.
Yeah.
I heard that I forget even where I heard it, but TCK forum or something, that this TCK guy would take all of his dates in college to like the airport, like restaurant, and he realized like the best fit for me for a partner is someone who's not going to think this is weird. And yeah, he found someone who's like, this is awesome. And he's like, yep, all right, we're going to go on a second date.
Well,
So
I can relate to that because I think that's why I stayed single for so long. And I've talked about this a little bit on the show, but you know, God bless my wife. I mean, she's put up with the moods and the just the issues of being a TCK. She's not a TCK, but she luckily, and I think that's why she and I connected so well. While she's not a TCK, her mom worked for the airline.
okay.
I think back in the time it was Eastern, whatever. Either way, but she's from Utah, but she traveled every summer. She went overseas. Her dad is actually from Germany, so I mean, while she didn't grow up that way, she still in the summertime would go places. She was on an airplane. She was doing that. So I think, and that's maybe that's a whole different show, but it's just a situation where I think the fact that she and I connected is because she wasn't afraid to hop on a plane. When I lived in Shanghai, she came over and saw me. This is before we were married, and she stayed.
Yeah.
She would get out. She got in a taxi. She traveled. She was more local than I was for about 2 weeks because she actually got kicked out of a taxi. And that's one of the jokes is like, you're local when you get kicked out of a taxi in Shanghai. So, and she didn't do anything wrong. The guy just didn't want to take her. And so he booted her out of the taxi.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's exactly,
Yeah.
And that's, it's, much respect to her. I mean, I don't think I could be with someone who wasn't of that frame of mind. That wasn't, when we went overseas, we went to Italy for our honeymoon. It was just like we always want to go somewhere, and right now we're just so stuck. It almost feels like, and that sounds so selfish when I say it out loud, but I don't mean it that way. As you can understand, I'm sure it's just a situation that we're so used to having plans.
Yes.
We're so used to being in an airport. We're so used to making, hotel, reservations, things like that. It's just it's not happening right now. So
yeah,
wow.
No, I completely understand.
Yeah. Well, let me throw you the next curveball then. So now that we've talked about all that, talked about where all you've grown up, where all you've been, even as an adult TCK. So you've actually done exactly what I've done. You've done it twice now, and I want to talk about both. But when you came back to the States for college, I'm assuming, right? American University, if I read it right.
Yep.
DC.
Yes.
Okay, so you came back. Remind me, where'd you graduate high school? You were
in Tel Aviv, Israel.
Okay, Tel Aviv. That's awesome. Yeah, but growing up the way you did, you hopped on a plane, you came back to the States for college. I did the exact same thing. You were smart enough, though. You went to a very diverse cultural city. Oh, am I wrong?
Well, okay. So for undergrad, I went to Florida to a small college. So American University was for my master's.
Oh, okay.
So we may have had the same experience of not having any.
This makes me even more happy. So where did you go? Yeah, so you were in Florida, but where in Florida?
It was a small Christian college.
Okay, and I went to a small, tiny little college in the mountains of near Asheville, North Carolina, and had never lived in North Carolina. Had nothing. I just thought that was a better chance of playing, walking on, all that stuff, having grown up overseas and not getting recruited. And it worked out. I played for a little bit. I got hurt, blah blah. But that's
awesome.
a whole different. That's all right. I'm over it now. It's been 20 plus years. So, but it was one of those things that I came back to a small town. I want to hear your acclimation story. Number one, your undergrad year, and then we'll talk about that. And then I want to get to going back as an adult and then coming back to the States again, because you and I both have been through it twice now, and that's not a common thing. So let's talk. First off, I'm going to be quiet, but I want to hear your acclimation story once you came back stateside, your first time around when you went to Florida.
Yeah. Oof. That's oh gosh. It's very layered. There are things still that I think I need to process about that, but it's a totally different transition because you're transitioning without your family unit. You're emerging into adulthood. You're learning about personal boundaries. All of this where you're like, I don't know the culture. And again, this was not when social media was in the palm of our hand. So it's not like I had access to understanding, really what the fashion was or like what people were listening to. So it was a huge, huge culture shock for me. And even like, how do I talk about my upbringing? And so, this is why I do the work that I do now with teens, because I'm like, you've got to do that pre-thinking about how to be wise in different social circles, because when you are talking about, I went skiing in Hokkaido, Japan, for winter break, people are going to look at you like, who are you? Why are you bragging? And it was me, sharing because I wanted to connect on a story about skiing. And I could have left off the Hokkaido, Japan bit, to just connect over the sport. So just having that social wisdom would have been better, I think. Now, some of my best friends to this day are from that time period in my life, and I'm so grateful. But if I had a do-over, I would have done a do-over in a heartbeat, just because I think there was more just kind of like personal stuff I had to go through, not only as a TCK, but just in terms of understanding what my values were as an adult. And again, like the people pleasing aspect came out. So, it was just kind of like a dark time of my journey. But
Oh,
I mean, my struggles are, to help other people make wiser choices, I think.
that's awesome. It actually, yeah, you realized it faster than I did, but that's exactly what I went through. I looked the part, I was supposed to act the part, and I didn't understand the culture at all, even though I was a 6'2" white guy and sports guy. All my teammates were from the same small town. It was just one of those things like I can blend in here, but intrinsically I was miserable.
Mm.
And it was something like you. It sounds like it was just something that continued on until I really got a grasp of it and understood what was going on. And it took years. It wasn't over. Like it was like I didn't have an epiphany that day in North Carolina. It still goes on. Like you talked about, it still goes on. Right. So
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
and yet like you too, I have great friends that came out of that world. And, here in Utah and in Idaho, I mean, friends for life. I mean, they're
Yeah.
my brothers,
Right.
things like that. But
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't make it an overnight, you know, ease, right? It doesn't just translation, everything's fine now. You still
Mm-hmm.
question yourself, you still question who you are and things like that. And why can't
Mm-hmm.
I just blend in? Why do I feel awkward still to this day?
Right.
Yeah, it's so I get it. I totally get it. I went to a small school too, so that's that the first time around. Then I ended up at Boise State, which sounds like you ended up then in Washington D.C. for your
Mm-hmm.
master's, right?
Mm-hmm.
So was that
Yeah.
easier
Mm-hmm.
when you got to Washington D.C.? Was that easier?
Yeah, I had done some traveling in between that. I had different jobs career-wise. So I think that's helpful too, just to kind of have that I'm more comfortable as an adult. I know who I am as an adult sort of thing. I do think choosing a more international and diverse student population campus was also really key, to having that adjustment and that sense of belonging really secure. I remember, having a conversation in one of the student lounges. It was like, you know, new students were like, "Oh, where are you from?" And TCKs, I think always you can tell a TCK who is a TCK because they always have like this pause or like deer in headlights, like filter, 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 filter. Like, what do I
Yeah.
say? What do I say? And before I could like come up with my 5-second answer, someone's like, "Are you a TCK?" And I was like,
Whoa.
"Yes." And another one's like, "You guys are everywhere on campus." And so at there I was like, right there I was like, yeah, I'm going to be known, I'm going to be valued, I'm going to be heard, I'm going to be understood. And that is something, you know, when I work with teens before going to university, I always say, is there a TCK presence on campus? How visible is that? And even if you don't take advantage of that support system, it is a comfort and it is a security blanket that I think is really important for first-year students.
No, that's see, none of that was available when I was around any school I went to. You know, it was just no. I've said this on the show when I first got to, especially Boise State. My roommate was an Asian American from Twin Falls, Idaho, and I was obviously this, right? And I was my parents were still living in Taiwan at the time, and so when we got to the doors, you know, on the door it said Ben Vogel, and it had the Chinese Taiwan flag, and then it had Manny Lee, was, you know, Lee, and it had the U.S. flag. And I so many times people walked in and were like, "I think they got your flags wrong."
Oh,
Like,
okay,
and so it
okay.
was like, you know, it was like I smiled and laughed and like, you know, actually they didn't. You know, it's just so little
Right,
things like that, right? So it's just I
right.
totally get that. And yeah, the term
Yeah.
TCK wasn't even. I didn't even hear about it until I read Ruth's book,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but yeah,
Yeah.
it just wasn't a thing back then. So
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. And I think the growing voice, the growing public voice of TCKs is really contributing to you know, kind of like grassroots movement for let's have more advocacy, let's have more support system. Because for so long, TCKs have been the hidden diversity or invisible minority or hidden immigrant, all of these things that are hard to identify, hard to recognize by higher education. And so that's definitely contributed to why there isn't this one uniform way to support them. But yeah, because we don't have the traditional markers of diversity, of, you know, of maybe ethnicity or language or age or gender, like, you know, we're the hidden kind of diversity. And yet I would say one of the benefits is we can be really, really good bridge builders. And so universities need to take care. Like, we can be really
oh,
good with international student orientation. We can be good with diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives.
no, I love it, and it's so therapeutic to hear that that's actually going on these days. Because when I went back, it was like, "Welcome, here you go, good luck." You know, there was never any transition. And the more I talk to people that were my like age, I guess, so to speak, and
Mhm.
those even before me, but yeah, this was just not even a thing. It was just like, good luck. You know, that it is what it was, and you can adapt how you choose, and good luck. See you later. You know.
Right. Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that's refreshing to hear that that's becoming a thing now,
I'm hopeful.
across the
I'm
board. Yeah.
idealistic.
Well, yeah, you're one of the
Why
reasons
do?
that's happening. Yeah, yeah. Then we're gonna get to that in just a second. But yeah, you're one of the reasons that's actually happening, and I applaud you for that. So,
Thanks.
um, well, let's talk about the second side of that then, the acclimation, because you and I both struggled as undergrads. We definitely struggled at small school. You know,
Mm-hmm.
here back in the States where we were supposed to just flourish right away. Boom, everything's great. It's not the way it works, but you also went overseas again as an adult.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so
Mm-hmm.
now you're back here stateside, and so did I. I went to Shanghai for 2 years and loved every minute of it. You know, a family issue brought me back stateside, and you know, how was that acclimation process as an adult?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think definitely the TCK um, upbringing where you go eyes first, you go ears first, like to those observational skills of like, okay, how are things done here? Really helps with adapting to any new surrounding. And I think that's really wise to do, just for personal safety, for also like what is acceptable, what is polite here. So, you know, I do that. I have done that when going abroad. Coming back to the US, yeah, you know, there's just a mess of stuff that you have to like sort through in reentry. And it's
Yeah,
like, you just have to sometimes make a list of like, oh, you know, this is why I'm back. This is why I love being back, cultivating that kind of um, mindset of, yeah, I really appreciate about this. You know, there's always that shock though of like the toothpaste aisle, and it's an aisle. It's not just a section in the,
yeah,
you know, toiletry aisle
yeah.
of other places abroad. You know, and then so that's always like a shock of the abundance and the convenience, especially here in the US. I never, sometimes, I'm still in shock going to Walmart thinking, wow, there's just so much. Even this year with kind of when people went into this scarcity mindset, I'm like, there is still an abundance of product, and you are very privileged. So anyways, I go through this back and forth of like, what does patriotism look like for me, or loyalty? That's always going to be there, that complexity and that confusion. But ultimately, I think it was a wise choice for me to come back. Always a hard choice because I have been, back and forth across the Atlantic Ocean. I've never lived in Asia as an adult, like I've actually only been back to that part of the world. I know Asia, there's several hundred countries, but I've only been back once as an adult, and that was last year. And, it's always on my radar, like, do I want to experience that as an adult? I'm not sure, but definitely.
Where'd you go?
Oh, where would I go?
No, where did you go?
Yeah, I went to Bangkok, Thailand.
Okay. Yeah, no, Bangkok. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was amazing, beautiful.
Yeah.
I was there for Families in Global Transition conference.
Oh, okay. Yeah. We'll talk about that in a minute too. But
yeah. So I spent a few days beforehand sightseeing. Amazing. I really want to go to Chiang Mai. So I need to go back.
You get that itch. That's one of my questions later, so we're gonna hold off on that. But yeah, where did you live as an adult, TCK?
I lived in Austria. That was with my parents, but solo I've lived in Greece, Hungary, and Poland.
Okay. How was Poland? I'm just curious. Yeah, I've never
in what way?
Just in general, like was it everything you were hoping for and more, or how did that go down? What brought you there?
Okay, so that was an interesting, again, blip of my story. I was there for about 6 months. I had lived in Central Europe before, in Hungary, so I was a little bit, anticipating maybe what the cultural mindset would be. I lived in a very small town, and right near the Baltic Sea, which was beautiful. And so I went over there as a language instructor, but also as an intercultural trainer. They were looking for someone who could do some training, intercultural training and language instruction for NATO Poland troops.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Yeah. So Polish military, I was working with them, and that was a wonderful, fun, ultimately just exciting experience. Yeah, because US NATO, they were prepping to do a satellite base in that town. And so I was, talking about US cultural values, things like that, what to expect and things like that. But yeah, it was such a unique part of my journey. I don't know. It's just,
I love it. No, that makes me smile just hearing stories like that. So yeah, I didn't see that coming. Yeah.
I know. I sometimes frame it different ways on my resume, and whatever way I frame it, I always get asked about it, and I'm like, sure, I'll talk about it. Super fun. I miss my guys.
Yeah, as you should. Yeah, I love that. So you've lived all over the place, obviously Poland too. Let's see. I'm just trying to think here. Like, so obviously, what brought you back overseas was just that whole entire, I guess, professional side of you, right? Did you have that itch? Did you have that itch to go back? I mean, because how long were you back stateside before you went back overseas?
Yeah. Oh, great question. My timeline is so squishy to me. It's just, what is time? I probably was there, back stateside 2-3 years. And then I went.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Because that was like when I was getting my master's at American University and working in DC. And then I was transitioning jobs, not knowing what to do next. And that opportunity emerged, and I was like, I'm going for it. So
love it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm always always open for going back overseas. I really, I
Yeah,
guess that
I'm
does
with
go
you.
back to like that comfort. Yeah, that comfort.
Which makes me ask the question then, because when I it certainly wasn't 3 years, it was 20 years before I went back overseas. I was back stateside for 20 years.
Mm,
Yet, having said that, when I flew back to Shanghai, I'd never been to China, mainland China, before I worked there in Shanghai. But there were nerves. You get on that plane. It's been a while. My parents still lived overseas when my brother and I were in college, so we go back and we do the Christmas thing. We do the every
hmm
now and then do a summer thing. So I mean, it
Yeah.
wasn't like I had been completely gone from that international lifestyle. But having said that, there was something. Someone like you can totally appreciate this, I think. But when I hopped on a plane after not living overseas for
hmm
so many years, I kept getting those emails from the school and give SCIS some credit. They definitely were writing me saying like, here's what you can expect. Here's what you're going to need to do right away. Here's, where you're going to be
Okay.
great. That was all great. But I understood it because I grew up that way,
Yeah.
which actually, by the way, it was probably similar to your experience. Being a TCK actually allowed me, it was part of the reason I got the job to begin with.
Mm.
I was an
hmm
educator. I'd spent years teaching. They wanted someone with a TCK background, someone that understood what these kids were going to be going through. The school that I worked at, they were going to, understand exactly what these kids were going through. Boom, check. You're right. And then I
Yep.
have an MBA, so they wanted a business background too. So check. It was like just
Nice.
check, check, check. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but getting back to what I was talking about, there was something, getting back to the airplane thing, getting back to the airport thing, getting back to the hotel thing.
Yeah.
That's the stuff that's supposed to scare the crap out of people, right? It's that long flight. It's that international experience. It's that going through customs. Oh, big eyes wide open. That was the calming part. I got off the
Yeah.
plane. That humidity hit me right away because I moved in the summertime. And I don't know if you've been to Shanghai, but like the second you walk off the plane, that humidity smacks you in the face. Well, you've been to Florida, so you get the humidity side of things. But there was something, so I walked up the plane and everybody's staring at me like I'm supposed to be like, whoa, what am I getting into, right? I was
Nope.
like,
Old hat.
I get it.
Bring it.
Here I
I'm here
am.
for
Yeah,
it.
let's go. For the first time in 20 years, I actually felt like this is where I was supposed to be.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I totally understand, that concept of, going overseas, and it's almost comforting, right? It's almost, you had 3 years, I had 20 years, but it was still like those 20 years went by quick in my head. It was just like, oh, I feel like I just got off the plane to go back to the States,
Yeah.
for college. And
Yeah.
it was just, it's so funny how people that grew up the way you and I did, I've heard so many stories of the same thing. Like it was just that, we talked about, the concept of home right away on the show, but it was just almost like, not necessarily home because I hadn't been there, but it was just that I can do this. I'm programmed. I'm wired that way. I can hop off a plane. Because I remember, you'll love this story, and I got to be quiet because this is
No,
about
no,
you.
no.
It's
I
not
love
about
it. I
me.
love it. I love this connection. Yes.
This is so funny. I haven't talked about this on the show, but like about 4 months before I was supposed to move overseas, I was playing. My buddy called me up and asked me if I could, baseball guy. He's like, we need an extra person to play in a softball game for the weekend, beer league, all that stuff. I'm like, I really wasn't in the mood, but I thought, you know what, it's my buddy, I'll go do it. Well, I ended up breaking my wrist that game.
Oh my
Like
gosh.
I wasn't even supposed to go. I wasn't even supposed to play. I was just subbing, like my brain was already focused on moving. It was all that stuff. But I was in a cast a week before I moved overseas.
Oh, well.
But the reason I bring this up is I got it cut off and all that. And as I was there, the nurse that was cutting off my cast, and she's like, so, tell me, are you, do you work around here? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, I have been. I've been a teacher for a long time. She goes, oh, so much respect for teachers. But I'm moving overseas in a week. And so I can't wait to get this off. And she was like, you're moving over. Where are you moving? And I said, China. I'm moving to Shanghai. And she's like, why would you want to do that?
Oh.
It was like,
she didn't get it. Yeah.
No, she didn't get it. And it's not, it gets back to what we've been talking about. It's like, it was nothing personal to her. She's born and raised in Utah.
Right.
She's like, I would never want to go overseas. They don't even speak the language. But yet there's even seeing Chinese characters everywhere, even hearing, as soon as I stepped off the plane, like all my Chinese came right back to me. It was like,
wow. Neat.
this is calming. It's what's supposed to happen. It's where I'm supposed to be. And it was funny that I remember, I still to this day, it's been 5 years since that happened, but I just remember thinking like, she doesn't get it, and I'm not knocking her, but to me, it made total sense. You know, like to you, it'd probably make total sense if you got the opportunity to go back overseas. Total sense. You know, just teach their own. You know, it is what it is. So
Right, exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and I hear that, and I also like to give the warning though to like TCKs who think like, as soon as I graduate, I'm gonna go back overseas, because living overseas as an adult is wildly different than living
Yeah,
overseas with your
yeah,
family.
yeah.
And so talking through some of that, and like, do you know what about the water bill or internet and things like that? Like you're going to have those additional adulting responsibilities that you didn't have as a child. So
Yeah.
as much as they've kind of like idolized or like romanticized their like living abroad experience as a child, sometimes I'm like, let's get down to the nitty gritty of what it means living abroad solo. Um, and also along that line too, where I did this assessment, I guess a couple of years ago, but it was looking at, like how I guess my worldview and view global affairs versus like local affairs. And I mean, the global, like cosmopolitan in me was like off the charts. And yet my local interest or my local curiosity was so minimal. And that was so revealing to me, because I was like, no, I'm here. I should really be curious and cultivate that kind of curiosity more about my surroundings here. If I'm always looking at like, exotic is abroad and travel is abroad and what's good is abroad, I'm really missing out on the unique culture and environment of where I'm at locally. And so that's something I've really kind of looked at sincerely this year, in not having that ability to travel abroad, and thinking, what have I not seen in my 30-minute radius even? What am I not aware of? And there is surprisingly a lot of diversity. And I'm like so grateful that I tapped into that, because it was life-giving.
That's awesome. You actually just beat me to one of the questions I didn't have written down, but do you, as a TCK, do you find it hard? You know, we always hear this term of living in the now, being appreciative of what's happening right here, right now. Do you have a hard time living in the now? Because I tend to look back a lot, and I look in the future a lot, like where I want to be versus where I was, and I have a hard time like, oh wait, things are pretty damn good right now. Like,
Yeah.
do you have a hard time living in the now?
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, I definitely, I think even this year has helped me reevaluate that. And because I think TCKs in their childhood might have this mindset of, yeah, I'm living here in the now and I need to get things done because I know I'm moving in a year, so I'm going to live
Right.
life to its fullest. Um, but like reevaluating that kind of value and time orientation this year, it's been one challenging, because I'm always looking. I have that, what's next, what might be better for me,
Yep.
and not seeing, how privileged I am in where I'm at, and
No,
yeah.
which is why I asked that, just because I struggle with that still.
Mhm.
I struggle with living here. Just be appreciative of what you've got, and I'm trying. I'm desperately trying, but it is hard because you know what you've
Mhm.
seen, you know what could still be out there. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, I'm trying to find. I want to scroll back up here because Calvin asked a question earlier, and I forgot to
Oh,
mention it. Yeah, so
Calvin, thanks for being here.
he's rocking and rolling here. He's our go-to guy. Let's see. Hold on one second. Let me see if I can find it. Maybe I.
Oh,
Yeah.
I see one.
Did
He
you
said,
that one?
Megan, mind if I
Okay.
use that line of romanticizing the nostalgia on an article I'm thinking of? That's fine, Calvin. You can cite me.
There you go. Make sure you cite her. Give her a citation there, Mr. Calvin. Uh,
Calvin, that's fine.
no, he's a good guy. So, well, look, we were hit the hour mark, and that's always the time I want to kind of turn things now. It's not necessarily that we're getting away from TCKs because this is what you do. You are someone who helps people that, man, I wish you were around back in the day when I was coming back to the States, because I have so many questions, and I'm so excited to ask these because it was just not available to me when I came back to the States. But you're I want to get this right. You're an intercultural training consultant. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Okay. My mind is blown. What exactly is that, and how did you end up one? Because I am so curious and wondering where you people were when I moved back to the States.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah. So I want to
Same
say that
thing.
again. Let me say it one more time, because you're a where are my notes here? Intercultural training consultant. So explain what that is first, and then explain what you do, please.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. I'm gonna break it down.
Yeah.
So, intercultural trainer. Okay. The key word in there is culture. So, starting off right at the basics, looking at what is culture. So, culture can be visible. It can be invisible. So, this is the baseline of what I do. Is let's really have a great grasp on and understanding of what is culture. And culture for TCKs, it's a whole nother ball game. But I like to do or share the analogy of the iceberg, the cultural iceberg. Are you familiar?
No, this is all
So
my eyes are. Yeah. So
yeah,
I'm just
okay.
gonna sit back and let you talk, because I want to hear this.
Awesome. Yeah. So I like to make a plug for American University, and why I chose that institution is because the intercultural trainer professor I learned under was Dr. Gary Weaver, and he came up with this model that is used with intercultural trainers. So the iceberg model is based on Sigmund Freud's iceberg
I know
of
Freud.
the
I'm
brain.
aware of
Yeah.
Freud. So
Okay.
yeah.
So an iceberg, right? The tip of the iceberg is visible.
Okay.
So when you relate it to culture, that's food, dress, language, customs, traditions, music, right? You can see, feel, hear that. What is underneath the iceberg, it's bigger than the tip, right? And that is your beliefs, your patterns, your worldviews, your manners, what notions of politeness is, your notions of time orientation. All of that is culture we cannot see, but it informs the visible. So if you think of culture A being an iceberg, and you think of culture B being a different iceberg, and they're moving along and they meet, where do they meet first?
Oh, you asking me?
Yeah.
Say that one more time.
Okay. So you have iceberg culture
Yep.
A, iceberg culture B, and they come together and they meet. Where do they hit first?
I feel like this is a loaded question.
It's better when there's a visual. I'm sorry.
Okay,
I'm
yeah.
like, how do
Because
I
you're
create
talking top
icebergs?
and you're talking underneath, right? So
They
yeah, they
yeah.
hit sidewise. Side, boom.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
hit exactly, and they hit underneath.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't hit the iceberg that's visible. When two cultures come together, they don't collide. They collide underneath. So cultures, when two, people from two different cultures come together, it's their worldview that's sometimes clashing. It's their ideas of what is power, what is privilege, what is right, what is direct communication, what is indirect communication. So you're fighting with that. So even like pre-departure training that I do, I say, you're going to expect the language to be different. You're going to expect the dress to be different. You're going to expect the music to be different. It's different. What you need to be expecting is what is going to be clashing. So again, like for when I do this training with, I've done it with TCKs, but also with international students, like international student orientation. When I say you might realize that your culture is clashing with this culture when you are not on time for classes. If you think time is fluid and like, oh, I'll get to class when I get to class because that's my culture, that's not how it operates in a US education system. You're expected to be places on time, or even at a dinner party. Like come over at 7. Are you going to come at 9:30 or are you going to come at 6:30? So knowing about that. So intercultural trainers, you're really unpacking first the definition of culture. You're unpacking your own cultural lens and your own cultural perspective so that when you interact with people of a different culture, you can understand, oh my goodness, I need to really be clear of what I mean when I say, oh, it's going to be difficult for me to come to your wedding. Does that mean I'm coming or I'm not going to come to your wedding?
Yeah.
You know, like more of like maybe a Japanese culture would say, oh, that is so difficult. I need to think about it, when they're really saying no.
Yeah.
So that's the function of an intercultural trainer, right? Now, the way I apply it in the field or cross sectors, I've taken a very non-linear approach to my career. I've danced in the corporate world. I've danced in higher education. I've danced in nonprofit. So the way that I apply this has taken wildly different programming. So, you know, I've done the like reentry training for study abroad returnees and, you know, unpacking that experience, because some study abroad returnees are going to be like, I need to go back to Italy right now. I will never adjust back to US culture. Everything in Italy was so amazing. And then they'll go through like this deep depression of like, nothing is great here anymore. You know, so yeah, it's applied in different ways. Is that helpful?
Yeah. How did you become one then? How did you fall into this? And, you know, I don't mean that rude. It's just something that I'm so excited to hear your answer, because I get it. Like I get what you do, and that's something that just it's inspiring to me. You know, like I told you earlier, we're gonna brag about you, and this is the time we're bragging about you. So I want to,
Thanks, Ben.
you're helping people. You know, like I say this, and I'm sure it's being taken. You know, I'm not trying to be a wise guy here, but like I wish there was someone like you doing what you're doing back when I was transitioning back into the States. You know, because there wasn't. And I would have loved that. And so I want to know how you ended up doing this, how you even heard of it, and what made this be your life choice.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you know, I do the work that I do because, like you said, when I was growing up, there wasn't this kind of transition care. There wasn't this resource available. It wasn't really talked about or even applied to what resources were available. So how I fell into it kind of was some reflection, some sincere reflection on my own personal background. What were the gaps? What did I need? And I began doing this when I was an English teacher, and realizing, okay, the cross-cultural skills I was developing. Also, I worked in high schools. So I was really prepping my students for the transition to university. And most of them were international students going to a different country. So I completely related to that. And I was like, wow, was I actually an international student? And I didn't realize it. And some universities are now tailoring their orientations to bring TCKs earlier to campus, which they do for international students. They have breakout sessions for TCKs specifically. Love it, so needed. But anyways, I was doing that heavy like processing. My mentors were kind of walking me through like, okay, what kind of career would this be? So I looked at, maybe I want to become a counselor, you know, like at an international school. They were so instrumental in my life with that transition. But I was like, no, I don't really want to go through like a whole nother BA. And so I was like, no. And then, well, why don't you become an independent consultant? But there was a lot of investment I had to make in that way. So that's when I was looking at a master's degree in intercultural communication specifically, because that could be translated in so many different sectors, as I've worked and danced across. But so it was at American University where, yeah, I learned these different cultural frameworks, the paradigms, and it was interdisciplinary. So then I was able to integrate the TCK profile into my research and was able to, yeah, like study in different schools, or, like I did School of Education and School of International Service. Amazing program, making a plug shamelessly. But
That's this is what
anyways,
this is for. So yeah, go for it.
yeah. So amazing. And it was there that one of my professors, or a couple of the professors, including Dr. Weaver, they were like, Megan, you have this lived experience of being a TCK. There is an emerging awareness for this kind of need. And so I was looking at different sectors who were doing this kind of work, reaching out to them. Again, this is, I'm finding this kind of work is not, one, it's competitive, but two, you really have to make the case. And HR, like in the corporate world, you really have to make the case, because this is like a fluff kind of like extra that they provide to families. I'm like, the number one reason for repatriation is family issues. So
Yeah.
if you can implement more systematically pre-departure training, re-entry training, it's going to work out for everybody in the end. So I'm finding also so again, I come in a very like mission, like US cultural world, and in the missions world, cross-cultural world, I find that they have the most of intercultural trainers, and I think it's really good. And I think they're equipping cross-cultural workers really well in that field. And I mean, I think it also has to do with who advocates, internally for other voices to come in. So I work with the Foreign Service Youth Foundation, which is amazing, because I was a DIP kid and I'm like, you guys are awesome. You're going to be great. So yeah, it stemmed from, yeah, I want to do something where I see a need and where I have a passion for. And I think that's what my calling is.
I'm going like this. I hope you see this. It's you and me. I get that. I totally understand that 100%. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. And I applaud you even more so.
Thank you.
You're also, I want to again continue to brag about you. You're also a speaker, you're also a facilitator, and you're also a writer. Specifically with the writing, we're going to get into that because that's what you and I have. Another thing you and I have in common. You're releasing a children's book soon. I know it's a little
Yes.
delayed. Thank you,
Yes.
COVID. Thank you, COVID, right? But it's a little delayed. But talk about your speaking, your facilitating, and your writing, because I'm aware that you've worked with, and those of you that are watching that are definitely completely understanding what Megan and I are talking about, but you're someone who's involved with families in global transition. Now, these other acronyms I'm going to let you explain, but IMI, yeah, go ahead. What's IMI?
So that's at American University, the Intercultural
Okay.
Management Institute. Mm-hmm.
Okay. What about CIES?
That was in grad school.
Okay.
That's a wonderful organization, conference. Comparative International Education Society,
okay.
Maybe.
I'll give you. I wouldn't know any difference. And then what about NAFSA?
Yeah, so NAFSA, that is the largest nonprofit organization for international, and U.S. higher ed educators, professionals, faculty, and so they do a lot of advocacy for policy in the U.S., and they do a lot of regulations and just amazing work with helping facilitate student exchange.
I love it. Oh, I love that. So have you spoken at all those events, or what's your speaking? Like, yeah, I kind of interrupted you, but like the speaking side of it, the facilitating side of it, and then the writing side of it. Talk about that. What all have you been doing?
Yeah. Thanks for letting me share. So with speaking, definitely love to go to conferences. and rub shoulders with people who I just idolize. And so like to present on either like the TCK profile, or I've done like international student services, and how to create more programming on campuses. Speaking also at retreats and conferences and events for TCKs. And I love doing that. That's one of my favorite things, because just like what we're doing, TCKs, I think, connect so instantaneously sometimes. And I really think it is important for TCKs to have conversations with others, other TCKs, just because you're so known and understood, and it's just like kind of like a deep breath, like, I don't need to explain everything. You don't think I'm bragging, like you just get it. So I do highlight that if universities have TCKs, let them be together. They love to have fun. They love to celebrate. It's not all like, oh, doom and gloom. You're never going to understand me. I'm so unique. Like, no, like, so I love to, just be with TCKs. And then as a facilitator, definitely when I speak, I don't necessarily love to lecture. I love to include activities and simulations and then do a debrief. So, like, you want to do an activity right now?
Sure. I'm up for anything.
Do you have a piece of paper?
I do. Yeah. My notes. I always have
notes.
notes.
Do you have a blank one? Okay. All right. So fold your paper in half.
Uh-oh. I'm on the spot now. Okay.
Okay. And fold it in half again.
This is a first, by the way. No one's ever put me on the spot. So
okay. Okay. Now rip the right-hand corner.
Rip the right-hand corner. It's opposite for you right now, but yeah. Is that like that?
And rip the other corner on the right.
On the right or left? By the way, this was your bio. No big deal.
It's fine. No one needs that. Okay, on the flappy side, rip the left corner.
This guy? Down here?
I'm not going to say anything else.
Oh, okay. Communication. I see where you're going already. A little good. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Rip the left-hand corner again.
This is my left, just so you know. Rip it again.
Mm-hmm. Fold your paper again in half.
Half-ish. Yeah.
Okay, and rip a hole in the middle.
Oh, boy. Okay, hold on. Hopefully the pen won't break here. Okay. Wow, you're really putting me on the spot. I love it.
It's an activity. Yeah.
This is a first.
Okay. And now open your paper. Okay. So I did the same thing, and this is what my paper looks like.
Why is should I turn it this way? There we go. We're kind of.
This is a snowflake activity, which I'll do as a facilitator, right? This is an example of an activity, and then we'll debrief. Why do our snowflakes look different?
Wait. I know why. Well, hold on a second. I'm not changing anything. I just realized something though, because I poked my hole with a pen and it didn't really get the holes the way they were supposed to. Hold on. Stand by. This is awesome. This is the teacher in me too, because I taught for so long. Yeah,
you can take a teacher out of a classroom, but
yeah. Hold on, I'm almost with you, and this is gonna make more sense in just a second. Okay.
But Ben, the point is that we're going to have different holes.
Oh, it's still gonna be different, but look, see?
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah. Because
oh wait, look, it's you, by the way. This was the backside of the bio. Here, we'll
That's
go this
really
way.
my bio. Hey.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, the point is, like, when I say fold it in half, I don't give instructions for this way or for this way. So students will go this way. You know, when I say the left-hand corner, this made it even more unique, you know, with the, like the camera change when you're like, oh, it's going to be your left corner. Yeah, that's an added layer to do it virtually. But anyways, this is a good activity.
By the way, I don't know if you can see, this is Hong Kong, by the way. This is my Hong Kong. Yeah.
That's on my bucket list.
You've never been to Hong Kong?
No.
Oh boy. That's that's
a little bit of a tragedy.
Yeah, can you see that? I'm gonna keep that right here. It's gonna be on every show now. It's gonna be on every show. I'm gonna keep that right here. Can you see that?
Yeah.
There's too much sunlight right now, but yeah, it's we'll keep that right here in every show I do. It'll be right there. That'll make me remember. Yeah. But yeah, awesome. Go ahead. Yeah. But the point to that was
the point, right, is, you know, some people who in their culture, like they're like rules follower, must learn, you know, they'll be asking me a lot of questions like, okay, this way or this way. And I'll, you know, I'm not modeling it. Maybe they'll look to their neighbor and copy what the neighbor does. So we debrief like, okay, are you leader? Are you follower? Also, a lot of teens freak out if they can't engage in ambiguity. And they're like, I need more information, Megan. And I'm like, nope, we're going to engage this uncertainty. Like, you just need to deal.
I love it.
So, you know, you can just, there's a million ways to unpack it. And again, it depends on the context, but it definitely, like, I'll do that for pre-departure training for educators going abroad. I'm like, okay, maybe this is a clue that you need more information from the school. Like how you said, the school gave you just a ton of information. Maybe you need to ask, how am I getting from the airport to my apartment? Maybe that'll make you feel better. So, you know, there's just a million ways.
No, I love it. Thank you for sharing that. I love that. What about your children's book? I want to hit that real quick. What's that about? Let's talk about that.
Okay. Wow. So I'm really excited about this story. It's written, and I have a publisher lined up, and one of my really great third culture kid friends, I met her in undergrad. She is an artist. She is illustrating it. Now, being 2020, there are certain significant delays. So it might be 2021, but I definitely will share the link with you and all that. I'm also doing some crowdfunding for publishing is expensive if you don't do self-publishing. And but anyways, so there's that coming up soon. But it's a story again, in some processing and reflecting. I was writing on, for me personally, like how Michigan is one of my homes. And there are a set of trees actually where I live. I live with my family, and they've been such an anchor for me and such a comfort to look at. And I recently learned that from my grandpa that my grandma would look out. They live across the street. Well, they used to, but my grandma would look out at those same trees. And again, she just really loved them. And it really sparked this kind of idea of, in my childhood, I played in those trees. My dad remembers when the trees were just little saplings. So this whole book is about these children who really find trees as a kind of an anchor for them. And one year when they come back, they find the trees are cut down, and I'm not going to tell you what happens, but they find a way to really honor the trees. And it's just, I've had people review it already, and they're like, Megan, I'm crying. So, you know, I hope it's a tool for parents to use, you know, to begin a conversation with their kids about even what in nature do their kids really value. Maybe that's important before they leave a country or when they go into a country. Like, okay, we really have to find, you know, an ice skating rink, or maybe we need to find a mountain for them to climb. So taking that perspective, and it's just, I think, a good debrief tool that kids are going to have about, like, oh, I need to say goodbye to my favorite tree before I leave. Something like that.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I actually just posted down below. That's a link to your blog, right? Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so yeah, check
Great.
that out. And I'm assuming as your book gets closer to being available, people can find out more information by going to that
Yes.
site right there. So,
Yes.
but speaking of your blog, you had mentioned the term intercultural transition. Talk about that. What do you mean by that?
The organization.
Is that what that? Yeah, because it's your nonprofit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So talk
So,
about that.
okay. So my co-founder is Dr. Hannah Morris, and we connected at the Summer Institute for Intercultural Communication in Portland, Oregon. Time, it's so squishy.
Especially right now, I get it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Gosh, like a handful of years ago now. And we were talking about, okay, in our transitions, again, she's a global nomad. She's from a military family. What could we have used? She's now with the foreign service and that kind of sector. So we were like, oh, what could we offer to teens? Because we both come from that educator world. We both come from international student services world. So we're applying that to transition care. And we work mostly one-on-one with teens, but we have traveled, like I said earlier in the show, we went to Frankfurt International School. We went to other international schools in Europe and did some workshops with teens. Very exciting, but this year that model is certainly different. So we're what else?
No, I love that. So it's just basically, yeah, you spend time with, well, first off, like I said, as a teacher, I'm very partial to those that work with kids. And I love that you guys are doing that. That's just, especially international kids, international school kids. So, cause they're, back in the day, it was almost, we were forgotten about, we were trying to figure out ourselves as we were going through it. But now there's a term, there's a purpose, there's people that realize there is something about us that needs to be addressed, and not in a negative way, but just in terms of a life skills way. And I love that you definitely are part of that. Well, what about you talk about having a global perspective and then cross cultural sensitivity. I love both of those terms, but what do you mean by that?
Yeah, holy cow. I mean a lot, and hopefully it comes across succinctly. Just one, can we acknowledge how many cultural moments we've had this year? Just in addition to everything with health-wise in the health sector, but we've had so many cultural moments locally and globally. And framing that kind of narrative, I would say the dominant one is, what is diversity? What is inclusion? What is equity? And where I come in with what I advocate for, what I stand for, what I promote and advocate in international settings is, what is the cross-cultural sensitivity you can bring based on your cultural lens and your experiences. So, I would say that sometimes people judge because they don't deeply understand a cultural context. So when I say cross-cultural sensitivity and taking different perspectives, like a global could also mean local, right? We all live in very, I would say, diverse communities. And so I would say intercultural work, or that cross-cultural sensitivity, invites people into the conversation where I think diversity, equity, and inclusion might not. And it invites people to engage in the work. It doesn't mean you'll be comfortable. It's constructed discomfort, but having that awareness that you're entering into a space where you're going to have to listen deeply, actively listen to another person's perspective is something that I advocate. That's the work that I do. As a facilitator, I'm going to set up those boundaries. We do a community contract. We establish like, what is respect? What does respect look like? I think, and I'm so nervous, I don't know about you, with schools being closed, the majority, like, where are those spaces? Where are those places that the next generation are having to have that kind of ability to shift perspectives, to be able to sit in a room and really have a conversation, really have the skills to listen deeply, practicing this kind of sensitivity. It starts at a personal level. We're talking so much, I think, on social media, in the media, at a systemic level, but who are the voices who are saying, no, this starts with a personal approach to understanding your cultural lens and understanding what is empathy? So maybe I should put that, explain that.
But that's so needed right now in general. Cross-cultural or not, it's needed just in the human race right now, right? So I love that. I love that that's a concern of yours, first of all, but that's one of your priorities, and I do appreciate that, because it's needed. It's needed whether 220 happens or not. It's needed just to understand each other better. At the end of the day, we're all the same. We all bleed red. People are. We all have the same wants, right? We want to be loved. We want to take care of our families, all that stuff, and it's just a matter of being accepting to differences. And that gets so thrown under the bus, especially these days. And it's sad, because you and I saw it and we were exposed to it so early on that maybe we have a different view of it. But at the end of the day, let's just understanding people and being exposed to differences. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing.
Yes.
Accepting different people for who they are. It's just, I don't know. Yeah. That's one of the perks of growing up overseas, I guess. You just learn that real quick. But and I do have a hard time understanding why people can't see it that way. But I applaud you again. Here we go again. I applaud you for what you're doing, because you are making a difference and you are allowing that to happen.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. I love that term, cross-cultural sensitivity. When I read about that and when I was reading your bio, it was just like that. That's another thing, kind of like the chosen family thing. There's certain things, as I've done the show, there's certain concepts and words and terms that have just popped in my head. I'm like, wow, that makes total sense, and that was definitely one of them. So thank you for sharing that. Here's an interesting one, and this isn't supposed to be like deep thought, so don't stress too hard.
Okay.
What about misconceptions of us TCKs? We're supposed to be adaptable. We're supposed to be, wallflowers. We're supposed to be chameleons. We're supposed to be all these things, But what about misconceptions of TCKs that maybe people don't necessarily think about right away when they think the term TCK?
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay. Like, where to begin? Okay. Well, I mean, I briefly, just to revisit at the beginning of the conversations, just talking about sometimes the terminology is misunderstood. I've heard like, you're a third culture kid. What are the 3 countries you grew up in? I'm like, or what 3 passports do you have? I think there's some misunderstanding in that regard about terminology. Let's see what else. I also think I think sometimes TCKs get grouped together and like, oh, you're a TCK, like you said, like, oh, you must be really great at adapting, things like that. So I think sometimes there's just like that global, like general understanding of a TCK that's misunderstood. And we miss the nuances and complexities. Not all TCKs have attachment issues. Not all TCKs are non-committed. Not all TCKs are gonna, be perpetual global nomads. And I think that misconception is changing. I'm hopeful that it's changing as more research is being done, as the growing public voice, people sharing their stories of saying, that's not my experience. You cannot apply that to me and my life. Primarily the research since the 1950s has been Western. It's been done in English. And I'm really excited about the TCKs of Asia. FIGT is doing a lot of work and advocacy around that and highlighting voices. So that's really exciting. And I would also say maybe another misconception. Well, okay, going into like my intercultural work, sometimes there's this global idea of all TCKs are intercultural, advocates, and they can champion valuing diversity. And again, don't make that global assessment with all TCKs, because again, when I said I did some intentional reflection of my experiences, I translated like culture specific experiences to like more general cultural learning. So, transformation isn't because of an experience. Transformation happens because of reflection. So I would say, yes, TCKs are natural bridge builders and can create community, but also they need to have that debriefing and kind of like that guiding of, yeah, this is a skill set.
No, I do love that. And that's one thing that I maybe I don't say enough on this. My experience is very similar to yours, and it's very similar to a lot of TCKs, but not every TCK struggles, and that's okay too. Like I actually applaud that, because there are plenty that do come back into their home country and their passport country and have no problem at all transitioning. I applaud that. I'm not speaking for everybody. When I say your story, my story, it's not everybody, I think it's more the norm, but I don't think it's necessarily everybody. And more power to them, and this isn't, it's not meant as a knock. It's not meant as a, what the hell, why aren't you struggling like I am? Or maybe vice versa. Right. It's just everybody's story is different. And it just so happens, I do think that it's more common than not common. But, I applaud those. And I do think a lot of it has to do with the time spent overseas too, because I was 7 when I went over and 17 when I came back.
Yeah.
You seem like you were in your younger years as well. And there were some people that would go over for 2 years and they transitioned right back into American or European lifestyles and no problem. And that's great. They got kind of the best of both worlds, because they got to double dip. They got to go over, see what was out there, and then come right back to what they were relaxed about, or what made sense to them. And that's great. But I do think the normal side of it, that, the people like you, people like myself that have spent significant time overseas, I think that plays a part in it too. I could be wrong. You're the pro here. So.
No. I agree. And some TCKs then who take the spectrum of like, I'm a TCK, I will never fit in anywhere. They internalize this message of terminal uniqueness and like, I will never belong anywhere. I think that is way on the other side of the pendulum, where, let's bring it back. Yeah. You are a human. Yeah. So.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I'm just looking over my notes here. Yeah, so we talked about that. What, kind of winding it down now, what kind of advice would you give to families that are finding out right now that maybe they're moving overseas?
Yeah, being proactive about some practical care, right? So what does your organization offer? Whether you're corporate, military, diplomat, international educator, what are those resources available to you? I would also say do some pre-departure training. Look at organizations like Families in Global Transition who have those resources, can connect you to books, podcasts, really tailored country-specific resources. So really good, really good people who can help with that. And also more at like the family level, having discussions about values, like, you are part of this family, so what does that mean? What do we value in terms of tradition, of language, of faith? And so their kids can begin to understand, okay, this is my family identity. And then also what is my personal identity? Because if they can cultivate, like you were a fan of sports, like that's a personal identity that was cultivated when you were overseas. So taking that into consideration, and just really understanding that every child is different. So, there's psychology about like orchid flower children who are going to need that extra watering, and not direct sunlight, and they're going to have the children who are like succulents, and you just, you know, let them thrive wherever, and they do thrive wherever. So just understanding that the family is going to be grieving in different ways. They're going to have different needs, and being proactive about that is really key. And you can call me.
Yeah, we're gonna leave. I think I already did, but we're gonna put all your info on there. One last deep question then, before I let you go. I think I already know the answer to this, but travel bug, you still have it?
Yeah. Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay, but I know we're winding down. But have you watched on Netflix The Social Dilemma?
I was just told about that by a guy I work with. No, I haven't, and I need to. I got to write that down too.
Okay, that really messed me up in a really good way.
Okay. Oh, in a good way. Okay, good.
And also I advise that to parents. Don't let your kids have social media until like 16. But yes, and this year, especially when, you know, borders are closed, airports are closed, it's really like when I scroll through Instagram, I'm like, oh my gosh, everyone has, you know, picture perfect travel stories, and, you know, oh, that's the good life. People have these perfectly curated travel stories, and I'm like, I want that. You know, like, and really just, I mean, this year especially, I've done that kind of like cultivating stillness, cultivating, what is the good life? What does success mean? And that's hard and that's messy, but yeah, like travel is definitely one of my passions, and it always will be, but really reining it in and saying, what are my motives? Is it for sustaining a lifestyle that I want to, you know, curate on social media, or is it really feeding my soul and feeding this kind of need that I have just because it's a passion and it's one of my hobbies. And so saved a lot of money this year not traveling.
Yeah, right. Sadly, but sadly true. But no, great answer. Great answer. Well, we've come to the last 3 questions. I do this with every guest that comes on here. These are supposed, now that the hard stuff's out of the way, you can take a breath, you can relax a little bit. These are the fun questions. You know, these aren't the deep questions. But give us something you know, maybe people don't know about you, even the people that know you close. I mean, you and I pretty much met on today, you know, so I don't know you that well, but what is something that maybe we don't know about regarding Megan?
So I have this really beloved bunny that I travel with, and I've traveled with it since I was 3 years old.
I love it. Yeah.
And it lives on my bed, but when I travel, some places I travel, it goes in my carry-on and not my checked luggage. But yeah, that's something.
We are talking stuffed bunny, right? We're not talking
right. No,
okay.
no, I've not had, you know, X number of year old bunny.
No, I love it. Okay, so on that note, then, what you know, if you could have a good long chat with anybody, whether they're still with us or not with us, you know, in terms of, and you can talk about anything for a solid hour. If I give you an hour, you could talk to anybody about anything. Who would that person be and why?
Oh,
deep question.
This
deep
is
question.
Not an easy question. Okay, so I'm gonna think about it in like people in concentric circles. Yep. So like with my friends being close to me, I would really want to have some deep conversations, intentional conversations with friends who I think we've had some misunderstanding, some miscommunication, some hurt, some pain. And this is something I would think it would take at least an hour to kind of hash out. So, yeah, I don't know. Like, I think we all have those people where
definitely.
We've been places of hurt where we haven't processed well, places of pain where we've projected on other people. So, yeah, I definitely want to reconcile, I would say, like in that way. That's a little heavy.
No, it's all right. Yeah.
You know, like
soul cleansing right now. This is the part of the show. It's soul cleansing. So you're good. Yeah.
And broadening That circle would be with family who I would really want to be in person, to be with. So that's something, I think we've all lost this year, time with family that we thought we would have. So family, and then like kind of a reach. I am a huge Brené Brown fan, and
yeah, I like her too. I'm manly enough to admit that I like her too.
Yeah,
so
I mean, she's amazing.
Yeah.
And I love that she started the Unlocking Us podcast and the Ask Me Anything episodes. I'm like, all right, well, maybe I don't need an hour with her. Actually, I do. I still love you, Renee, but amazing. Yeah, and also I would like to have a conversation with President Trump. I'd really just, I think what can we believe on the media? And so I just want to have a chat. Just want to chat. So,
that's fair. I can respect that. I can respect that.
Cool.
Good answers. No, nothing wrong with that. And then the last one though, you still have the travel bug. So being the fact that you've been to over 30 countries, right? Did I read that right? Is there still some place that you like to get to?
South America.
Yeah.
I know that's not a country, but I mean, I definitely, I'd love to go to Brazil. I'd love to go to Paraguay. Oh man, Argentina, Colombia. I can name all of them, but I'd love to go experience everything of that part of the world.
No, great answer. It's so funny that you and I are similar that way, because I've never been to Mexico. I've never been to that.
I'd love to go there too.
Yeah. Just one of these days.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, listen, Megan, I don't want to take up any more of your time, but thank you so much for doing this. This has been first of all, it's a treat. They're always a treat, no matter who's on here. But you have brought so much to this that it's making me think, and I love that. When you kind of spark my brain and make me think of things that someone that grew up exactly how you grew up, and you make me question some things, but in a good way. Like maybe I didn't do this exactly right, or maybe I could have handled this better, and things like that. But it's because of the work you do. You're really changing lives, and specifically for people like us. I know maybe there's people watching that didn't grow up the way we did, and maybe they don't quite understand that, and that's cool. No harm, no foul. But for people that did grow up, and that number is getting exponentially bigger daily. Even in 2020, I mean, there are people that are still moving overseas. There are people that are over there right now. I worked at an international school. You've worked at international schools. We know firsthand that that's happening.
Yeah.
The fact that there are people like you that are making a difference and allowing those transitions and those acclimation processes to be better, and people aren't going through the struggles that you and I went through. I applaud you tenfold. So thank you. Thank you for the work you do. Keep it up.
Thank you.
But yeah, stick around, because I do want to talk to you personally once we get done on this. But I'm going to sign off now. I just want to thank everybody for watching. Those of you that are watching, this will be replayed again on BenThere.org.
Yes.
As soon as we're done. But Megan, thank you so much for your time. Stay safe, and I hopefully you'll get overseas quickly soon, one of these days, just like the rest of the world too. So,
yeah, exactly. Thank you so much, Ben. Thank you for this platform. I just think it's amazing that you're giving, opportunity for voices. I love that you're sharing your story. I love that people are commenting. I mean, amazing work. I love that you're doing this.
Thank you. No, we're going to keep it going. I think I told you this before we went live. I'm going to do about 5 more of these. Then we're going to shut it down for a little while. We're going to regroup, not because anything's bad, but we're just going to come back better and even more positive, and more guests and everything like that. Season 2, as I like to call it. So
amazing.
But thank you so much for what you do. Stick around. Those of you that are watching, if you're watching on YouTube, please make sure you subscribe to the BenThere YouTube channel. That does a lot, not only for myself, but it does a lot for the show. It keeps it rolling and keeps it going. If you're watching on Facebook, thank you so much. Either way, Miss Megan. I'm going to say it, Megan C. Norton. I'm going to give you that professional side. And one thing I forgot to mention, though, I have not seen a cooler background than yours in 25 shows of doing this. So I love that there's a globe in the back. It's not teacher in me. I love that you've got everything structured and organized. So I appreciate that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank
yeah.
you.
But yeah, those of you that are watching, thank you so much. This will be available again, like I said, on BenThere.org. As will, I'm going to put that, you inspired me, Megan. I'm going to make sure that I get that blog writing post that I did about airports. Sounds so silly when I say it out loud, but you'll appreciate it. People like us will appreciate it. So yeah, that'll go up tonight as well. But thank you for doing this. Please take care of yourself. My best to you, and stick around. Don't quite close off just yet. I'm gonna end the broadcast, but stick around.
Great.
Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next
Bye,
week.
everyone.
Bye bye.